Vietnam veteran and historian Leonard Mike Scruggs, a former Air Force intelligence officer and Air Commando and recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross, Purple Heart, and 2 Air Medals. Mr. Scruggs is author of Lessons from the Vietnam War, Truths the Media Never Told You, and he has them back in the back table. So if you're interested in purchasing a book, please go to the back table after we are finished. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Scruggs.
Thank you, President Vail. Got it wrong?
Who's going to be your Supreme Court Justice?
We're going to the back of the room now.
I am honored to be here and to speak to so many Vietnam veterans and their spouses at one time. My wife is also a Vietnam veteran. She was a nurse, and I'm sorry that she couldn't be here. But I'm indeed honored, and I have looked on the internet and to see some of the things that you have done. And I have to say that I'm particularly honored to be here because of all of your accomplishments, especially after all that some of us went through at the end of the war, near the war. Vietnam veterans were being knocked by one person or the other, and a lot of people thought that would never recover. But at least in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and other places I've lived, people honor veterans of every war. I can wear my Vietnam veteran ball cap to any ice cream place in Hendersonville, and they'll give me a double scoop for nothing. But speaking to so many, I have to be impressed about what's happening with you and around the country. A couple of months ago, an organization called Honor Air, started by Jeff Miller, who's Hendersonville dry cleaner, has been putting World War II veterans on planes and taking them to see the World War II monument. Well, Jeff Miller got the idea 2 months ago that we ought to start honoring Korean and Vietnam veterans too. And so about 2 months ago, Jeff Miller and Honor Air arranged for 2 bus loads from Hendersonville or Henderson County, a few other counties around too, to be bused down to the Charlotte Speedway, where they had a fantastic program for all of us. But the most important part to me was on the way down on Highway 74 going toward Charlotte. Every crossing there were fire trucks, American flags. I saw the second one and I could not hold back my tears to see that Vietnam veterans were being so honored. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I thank Pat and Kay for inviting me. What I'm going to talk about, I've got 2 books for sale. I'm only going to mainly talk on the one on Vietnam. And there are really 2 stories in that book. There's my own personal story, but this book is not a personal story. It's got my personal story woven into it in several chapters. And then it tells about really the whole Vietnam War. It tells not only about the military part, but the political part. It tells about the prisoners of war and missing in action. It tells that it was a 2-front war. We were fighting a war in Southeast Asia, and we were fighting a war at home against an entrenched leftist group of front organizations who wanted to drive us out of Vietnam without honor. Well, as John said, I'm an Air Force combat veteran, graduated from Air Force ROTC in 1961. Intelligence officer, I was a navigator in the A-26, which I'll tell a little story about. I got to be the co-pilot too. And I was in Air Commandos, 606, flying out of Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. It's right on the Laotian border. The A-26 is a twin-engine, propeller-driven attack bomber. You might recognize it from World War II movies or Korean movies because it's been around. The Unmarked Corporation revitalized it and made it into a formidable weapon. And I'll tell you a little about this as a personal story. On February 22nd, 1967, that's George Washington's birthday, I got one of his Purple Hearts because I was shot down. And I'll tell you a little bit about that story. But the book is a part biography, it's part history, it's part philosophy, it's part commentary. It's meant to be an educational help. I had sort of my sons in mind when I was writing the book, and I was a stockbroker for E.F. Hutton, Smith, Barney, etc. for a little over 20 years, and on Christmas several years ago, before I retired, I went to the boss's house, and I noticed he had on the wall a painting of what looked like a Napoleon area general. I thought he was French, and I asked him, "Who is that?" And he didn't know, so I went to Barnes & Noble. I was going to find out. And so I was looking in the books on Napoleon, and I saw a book to the side, and it said Air Commandos. I thought, well, I was an Air Commando. I picked that book up, just like I do a lot of books, turned to the middle, and I looked down and I saw my name. And they recalled the instant which I was shot down. And so they got a couple things wrong. We had two accounts. One of them said I was a first lieutenant and I was a captain, so I knew I was going to have to straighten it out with my sons at the dinner table. So I told them a little bit about the war and about my experience. And my youngest son, Brandon, who's got 3 degrees now, he's a lawyer in Massachusetts, trying to get him back down to the Carolinas. But he looked at me and said, "Dad, were you in World War I or World War II?" And so I knew I had my educational work cut out for me. And so I started writing up that story. It got published in another book, and a couple of articles. I realized to write for my sons, I had to get their attention quickly, and I couldn't give them a volume of things. Usually they wouldn't read anything more than one page, but I wound up with a whole book, but I was keeping them in mind because I wanted them to know, and I wanted their cousins to know too. So that's the reason it's got 2 glossaries in it. It's got a glossary of words for people that don't know a lot of these things, what BC stands for. It's got a glossary of aircraft, not all of them Air Force, a lot of them Army, helicopters especially, and some educational things in the book to help educate you as you read along. The glossary comes along early, so you'll know what all these abbreviations are and things like that. So that's an overall book, but I put some things in it that people would not normally want to talk about, but I felt like writing the Vietnam, I had to talk about everything. And so one of the things I wrote about was My Lai, and that's in there. And so had something on there, Army organizations, both North Vietnamese and American and Soviet, what a division is, how many men in it. But I felt like I had a message that I wanted to get across to sort of straighten out the truth of Vietnam. And the title is The Lessons from Vietnam, but very well could be The Truth About Vietnam. the subtitle is What the Media Didn't Tell You, because they didn't always have the truth, and they still today don't always have the truth. The foreword to the book, for that reason, is called The Battle for Historical Truth, because it's rather a battle for historical truth. I'll mention again, it was a two-front war. We were fighting politically in America. Not everybody realized that. And we were fighting over there. A little bit of background. When the French lost the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, they subsequently withdrew from Southeast Asia. But actually their defeat at Dien Bien Phu wasn't really enough to have gotten them out. What the communists had been working on for years was the French public. They were already weary from the war in Algeria and World War II, is they kept undermining them in their propaganda in their homeland. And that's the way they fought Vietnam too. It was a two-front war to them. They knew it. Not everybody in the United States knew it, but I cover a lot of that in the book, which is the reason it's not a politically correct book. Because of all the misinformation about Vietnam, there are a lot of myths that I still see. And a lot of those myths where I went to graduate school at Stanford when I got out of the Air Force, and a lot of those myths were circulating around the campus organizers, community organizers, whatever you call them, were saying these things. But some of them were that Vietnam was a civil war. It wasn't a civil war. Way back in the 50s, the Soviets had decided that they were going to take the rest of Vietnam. So it was not a civil war. Another big thing was that the Viet Cong and the NVA insurgents had popular support. Well, only the popular support that bullies get, which is not really much. And our president actually made a mistake on that a couple of months ago, saying that they had popular support. Another era is that it was strictly a guerrilla war. Well, it started out as a guerrilla war, but that was never the communist intentions. It was going to be an escalating thing. And if you look at the history of the Korean War, you realize before the big invasion that drove us down into the Pusan perimeter, they had insurgents coming and they had guerrilla warfare. So a lot of it was modeled on the Korean War, and not everybody looked at it. Another thing, and we'll get into some of this, is that the war was unwinnable. Actually, we could have won it any time we had the resolve to do so. We certainly could have won it in 1965, before Hanoi had the greatest anti-aircraft complex in world history. We certainly actually could have won it in 1967. 1967 was a crossover when the communists could not get enough supplies through to make up for what had been destroyed. And at the same time, they were not able to get as many men across because of those that were being killed in behalf of their cause. Another thing people don't realize, a lot of people still believe the press view that the Tet offensive of the communists was an embarrassment to the United States. Actually, it was the greatest defeat of the Vietnam War for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. And actually by that time, most of them were, even the Viet Cong were mostly North Vietnamese. They had 85,000 total going into it. Within the period of 30 days, they'd lost 45,000 dead. In the first half of the year, the communists had lost 100,000 dead. So it was a great defeat for the communists, but they were able to turn it into a political victory because of their astute handling of the public relations and their favor in the press in this two-front war. Another myth that I'll tell you a little bit about is that air power was ineffective. Actually, it was very ineffective when it was used properly. But Lyndon Johnson didn't use it properly, and Robert McNamara, and I'll get into that more. Another myth was that Uncle Ho Chi Minh was really just a nationalist and he was a nice guy. But Ho Chi Minh, as soon as he took over North Viet, or his part of Vietnam after the French left, had 50,000 of his political enemies, mostly nationalists, executed. Almost 1 million refugees fled North Vietnam because of what was going on. About 600,000 of them were Catholics because Ho Chi Minh, if anything, was extremely anti-Christian. Well, those are some of the myths. But you might remember John Kennedy, January 20th, 1961, his inauguration. I remember for some reason I was home and I was watching it on TV. He said, "Let the word go forth to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty." Well, Kennedy was not speaking in a vacuum. He didn't say those things just because they were good-sounding words. Just 1 week earlier, Nikita Khrushchev announced his doctrine of wars of national liberation. And he used as an example of something that the communist people could do was to straighten out the situation in South Vietnam and make it a communist part of the greater South Vietnam, just 1 week before. According to U.S. and Allied intelligence sources, from 1959, the Soviet Union had been orchestrating and financing North Vietnam's war against South Vietnam step by step, with Soviet approval at every step. Another thing a lot of people don't realize is the war was really a proxy war between the Soviet Union and the United States, with the Chinese, sort of the competitors of the Soviet Union, chipping in as much as they could. But the two-front war was key to understanding a good many things. But the Viet Cong, the National Liberation Front, which is the political part of it, never had too much real support from real friends. During their rise to power and during the war, but mostly early, they engaged in terrorism, a bad word now, but they were doing it back then, and numerous assassinations. The total count of assassinations of school teachers, politically incorrect people, civic leaders, government officials, 36,700 assassinated. Though that's the kind of people that these were, and they only got support because people were scared to death of them. One reason why they lost so many people killed in Tet is the South Vietnamese took great vengeance upon them. It wasn't just the Americans that did it, it was the South Vietnamese who proved that they were worthy soldiers during Tet. Now, I'm going to take a slight break from this and tell you a little bit about how I got that Purple Heart. And I'm going to go and get my prop over here, which is a wooden model of the A26K, also called the B26K. Actually, it was the improvement made by Onmark Corporation in California of the B-26 Invader. And it was a formidable weapon. I'll tell you right up front that up until the C-130s, Spectre fire ships came along, we were the best truck killers ever. We were the best truck killers even. And one reason is we were slow, but we could stay on station a long time. Now, personally, I didn't like that. What I liked would be to do a hit and turn right around and go back. And that's what we, over the radio, we hear these Navy and Air Force jet pilots say, well, almost out of fuel, I got to go back. And we were out there circling around doing what was next. But we could stay on station a long time. And since we were slow, we were very accurate. And what we used the most, we had 8 50 caliber machine guns in the nose. They were so powerful that we only loaded 6 of them. Because you could, if you hit a large 18-wheeler sized truck broadside with these 6 guns, could throw it for a flip. Very powerful, and most importantly, very accurate. We also had wing stations. Our main mission was night armed reconnaissance, so we carried flares, although we frequently worked with the C-130 flare ship. And we had various things on the bottom. We carried rockets, all kinds of little bomblets, and it's a different menu for the night. We also had a bomb bay, and you can stick a lot of small bombs in there, but we could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs. And that's the only thing, when I was flying them, that we did use is the 1,000-pound bombs. And not many people actually got to use them, but I did. And I'll tell you how that went. We took off on February the 22nd. We were one of 2 aircraft. We were called Nimrod 36. They were called Nimrod 37. Nimrod's from the Bible. It's a mighty hunter. Not necessarily a good guy hunter, but that's how we got the name. And they had spotted an enemy truck convoy just out of North Vietnam in the Ban Karai Pass. It's about 2 passes south of the Mugia Pass. And we had an oil leak, so our partnership went out there first. He'd been out there about 30 minutes. By the time we got out there, he'd set about 6 of these trucks on fire. He had fires all over the place, and he was having a good time. So we got there, and we noticed that even though he seemed to be having a good time, maybe he hadn't looked out the window the right way, because he was being shot at it from at least 4 directions. We saw 2 37mm anti-aircraft guns shooting at him. That's the one where they have the tracer go up. It looks like a little white ball go up sometimes, and it bursts and throws out steel and nasty stuff like that. So it's 2 37mm shooting. That's really a World War II sort of readoption. We saw a Russian-made CPU-4 shooting at him. We could tell those by the red tracers. And right down near the trucks, we saw a 50 caliber anti-aircraft gun, probably an American Lend-Lease from World War II. I've since discovered there might have been 2 50 calibers instead of 1, but we'll talk about that. And so it fell our lot to Okay, we'll take the guns. You finish off the trucks. Well, we'd spotted 137 millimeter for sure. So we went down probably about this angle, and we let rockets go from each wings. And it looked to me like they hit directly on him. And then he didn't shoot for a few minutes. Then he was shooting again. So we thought, really disappointed. It looked like a direct hit, and he's shooting again. So we decided we'd use one of the 1,000-pound bombs. So we came in at a steeper angle, and I never had dropped one of these before. And it was a surprise to me. So we came in, pulled out, going up like that, and that bomb went off, and the plane just shuddered. I thought, oh boy, we're going to be one of the first planes knocked out of the air by their own bomb. But it was sort of a scary experience, but that did it. Nobody ever heard from anybody in that area again. So we saw where the other 37 millimeters were coming from, or the other 37 millimeter. So this was kind of stupid, but we said, let's try the rockets again. Maybe they'll work. And again, looked to me like a direct hit. And he's silent for a few minutes, and then as Nimrod 3.6 lights up a few fires, he's shooting again. So we thought, well, I guess we better drop our next 1,000-pound bomb. And so, you know, we came in about like that, and as we were coming up, you know, wham, all that shuddering and everything. This time I thought, we'll probably survive. So we'd wiped out 3 guns, and now we better get that 50 caliber right down near the trucks. So we came in at a not very shallow angle. We came in about like this, not very shallow, and let him have it with the machine guns. And we'd get down there pretty low and come up like this. And we did that, and he was silent for a little bit. And a few minutes later, though, we saw Nimrod 3.6 sort of making a racetrack, and we saw those white tracers right behind him. So that this time, we're going to get that guy. Might have been 2 guys, but so we came in very shallow. This is not a good idea. This is not an instruction on how to make war in one of these planes. Very shallow, so we could just keep shooting those guns, just and got down really 50 feet off the ground and then pulled up. And as we pulled up, I saw those white tracers come in front of the plane and then back of the plane. And then I heard a clang, 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 clang. And saw white smoke coming out of that engine. I was sitting over here on the right. And I looked at the fuel gauge, and I saw the fuel gauge just going, just on the right side, the fuel just going out. But we climbed up to 5,000 feet. We knew we had definitely some trouble. We feathered that engine, that's to turn it off. And we kept on going to 5,000 feet. And we got up 5,000 feet, and they directed us where we could dump our extra fuel. We had extra fuel tanks. Get rid of all the extra fuel. We dropped all the flares, all the extra rockets, any armament we got rid of. And we decided that we would start trying to put the fire out. Well, on the way to the dump, the Nimrod 3.6 came under us like this. We were about 5,000 feet. He came under us like this, and he said, well, I think your wheel well is on fire. So there were 2 fire extinguishers that you could push a button and remotely they'd squirt around your Bombay and your wheel gear. So we pushed one of those, and Nimrod 3.6 kind of made a racetrack, came back around, he said, your wheel well's still on fire. And we only got one more to go here, so we push that button, Nimrod 3.6 comes back, says your wheel well is still on fire. Now, what we did next, I'd seen in a World War II movie, but I never thought I'd have to live through it myself. I had been through the practice of taking the plane in a almost 90-degree dive, and actually, I have to admit that I threw up, but we made it out. It was a terrible thing. The thing, we didn't have air conditioning. We didn't have, by the way, ejection seats, but we made it through that. But I was sitting in the jump seat when we did that, so it wasn't as sickening. But here we go. We got one engine, got a fire in the wheel well, and we're going to make a dive now with one engine, just going like that, 5,000 feet. So that we did. And we finally came up about altitude 1,200 on the altimeter, is about 700 feet off the ground. And Nimrod 3.6 came up behind us, and he said, your wheel well's still on fire. And then within a second, he said, my God, your whole wing's on fire. Get out, get out. So, no ejection seat. What you have to do in the A-26 was I had to pull up a lever. And so the windstream and everything took the cockpit off on both sides so that we could unstrap, and you had to jump. Like I was right here, I had to sort of just jump for here and hope I missed the tail. And well, I left out one little part, is we had to make the decision as to whether we were going to bail out in the first place or crash land at Nakhon Phanom. And our decision was actually before this thing about your wheel well is still on fire, and my God, get out. We were contemplating putting the thing down, one engine, no landing gear, wheel well on fire on a pure steel planking thing. That didn't sound appetizing to me, but there had been a lot of people killed or badly injured trying to bail out of A-26s because they hit the tail or the fuselage. So that wasn't a good choice. But when he said, my God, get out, I blew the canopy off, unstrapped my shoulder strap, seat belt, crouched down, and leaped for the wing. And the windstream knocked me back in the cockpit and tangled me in that. So at this point I thought, there's no way that I'm going to get out of here alive. People ask if you pray in these situations, and I was praying all the way. One thing that came to my mind a few minutes before was the verse about sparrows, that God knows when every sparrow falls, and surely he knows when you're falling. So that had gone through my head. But I got in a position again, somehow. By this time, McCleskey, the pilot, was having more trouble. The ailerons were on fire. The aircraft was getting unstable. We're only 700 feet off the ground. So I got in a position and I did pray a prayer again, and it can be found in the Psalms, for one, is into your hands I commit my spirit. So I was out of the plane, and then I realized it was at night, and it was black, but I realized the chute had opened, and rid of this.
How many crew members?
It's 2 crew members, just the pilot and I. Sometimes we carried 3. And some missions later, they carried 3 normally with some sort of a radar outfit. But I realized as on my back, I realized the chute was open, and the stupid thought again went through my head is, you know, parachuting is fun. It was my first and last parachute jump. But I wasn't thinking. I looked down and I saw a tree, and it was at night, and I didn't realize the reason I saw that tree because 3 seconds after we got out, the plane blew up in midair. And then at that time, the base commander was walking the perimeter, and he'd been notified they could see the burning aircraft coming from the Confidant several miles away, just in flames. Fire trucks, everybody was alerted. It blew up. He said it was the brightest flash that he'd ever seen. And so, but then I hit the ground hard. I realized I couldn't get up. My grommet on my right boot was bent like somebody hit with an axe. I don't know whether I hit the tail, whether it was just the 700 feet altitude. I think really a piece of the plane hit me in that foot, but I couldn't walk. And I was carrying 2 radios on me, and I got on the first one and I started talking. I thought I was talking to the other A-26. It happened to be the 130. And we had made it into Thailand, but it was not a safe part of Thailand. There were 2,000 insurgents in that area, and we'd lost sergeants and things, assassinated on the way to Nakhon Phanom, the town. So but 30 minutes later, I saw 2 helicopters coming. I think from Yubon Air Force Base, might have been Udon. But they were jolly greens. I was delighted to see them, and I pulled out a flasher. And as they got close, I was given sort of a gyro, ground-controlled approach. It said, turn right 30 degrees, turn left 15, until the lead helicopter was right over me. He didn't see me, but the second one did, and came down and picked me up and carried me into the helicopter. And they didn't have morphine or anything. They had those little whiskey drinks that the airlines had. And I immediately had 2 of those. And I worried about McCleskey, the pilot, because I never heard him on the radio. They were probably talking to him on another frequency. But when the plane landed, the ambulance there, he put me in the ambulance, and he was in the ambulance. And he looked terrible. He had scraped along the fuselage, but he was out of the hospital before I was because he had just broke both of his ankles. But he said, did you hear anything about Nimrod 3.6? I said, no, what about Nimrod 3.6? He said, they can't find him. And what happened is when our plane exploded in midair, the debris hit them in the cockpit and killed them instantly. So that was a tragic story, but it's a story that I cannot forget. And I don't mind telling people. I don't always tell kids about the last part of it. But that was my particular experience. You know, I've got more, but there's no time to give everything I have to say. So how much time do I have left? Any?
No. No, sir.
None. Well, at that, I'll take that as a command.